Silence swallowed the private dining room at Bella Knot. The rain fell in sheets against the frosted glass, hammering like fists demanding entry. Inside the back booth, 3 men in tailored suits sat motionless. Aleandro Castellano, 6'2" and broad-shouldered beneath charcoal wool, held a wine glass halfway to his lips. His dark eyes, storm grey at the edges, impenetrable as closed gates, remained fixed on the legal documents spread across mahogany. A thin scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, the kind of scar that made men look away first. Beside him sat Enzo, built like a concrete wall in an Italian silk shirt. Across from them, Sal drummed one finger against the table, a gold ring catching the candlelight with each tap. They had been sitting here for 47 minutes conducting business in the language of silence. But what she did not know was that the man holding that wine glass commanded every shadow in San Francisco's underworld. At exactly 11:13 p.m., a sound pierced through their quiet. The service entrance door shuddered. Not a knock. A collision. A body striking metal with the dull thud of something living and desperate. Then a gasp, raw, agonized, barely human. The kind of sound that comes from a person whose ribs are screaming. Aleandro's eyes lifted from the documents. In 15 years, neither Enzo nor Sal had seen their boss move without calculation. His hand set the wine glass down with absolute precision. He rose from the booth, his movements controlled and deliberate, each one economical as a sword stroke. The candlelight caught the silver cufflinks at his wrists as he turned toward the frosted glass separating the private dining room from the kitchen corridor. Through the glass, a shape collapsed against the service door. Small. Blooded. Female. Her uniform was white, some kind of medical care worker's uniform, now a watercolor painting of red that bloomed from her left side, spreading across her ribs like a wound that would not close. Her hair hung in a soaked dark rope down her back. Her face was pressed against the cold metal of the door, and even from this distance, even through rain-streaked glass, they could see the trembling. She was crying. Not sobbing. Something worse. Silent, desperate tears, the kind that come when a person has cried so many times that their body has forgotten how to make noise. "Boss," Enzo said quietly. Not a question. Not an order. Just acknowledgement that something had shifted in the room. Aleandro did not respond. He watched the woman slide downward, her fingers scraping against the door frame, her body seeking shelter from a rain that showed no mercy. Her skin looked grey in the lightning flashes. Her eyes were closed. Her lips moved without sound. She did not know who he was. She did not know that one phone call from this man could erase a human being from existence as though they had never drawn breath. She did not know that the suit he wore cost more than her annual rent, assuming she had rent, assuming she had anywhere to live. She did not know that the hand reaching toward the service door had ordered men into darkness and never asked for them back. What she knew was that the rain had become a knife wrapped in ice, and the alley had become a grave, and she was running out of time. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you deep. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now, let us go back to the beginning, 12 hours earlier, to understand how a woman with nothing left collided with the man who owned everything. 12 hours earlier. 7:34 a.m. The alarm screamed. Aria Reynolds did not open her eyes. She lay in the dark of her studio apartment, if calling a room 12 feet by 14 feet an apartment could be considered anything but comedy, and stared at the ceiling she could not see. The water stain in the corner took up space like a ghost. She had named it Gerald weeks ago. It had not grown since Tuesday, which counted as good news. Her hand found the phone on the milk crate beside her mattress. The screen was cracked in the bottom left, the damage spreading like frostbite with each passing month. 27 years old and everything she owned bore the pattern of something breaking. She silenced the alarm. 7:34. She had 18 minutes before the Lincoln Care Home would dock her pay for being late, and 23 minutes before Douglas Hale might pick up the phone and decide she had betrayed him again. She sat up. The single sheet, white cotton from a thrift store, thin enough to see through, fell away from her body. Her ribs showed like a xylophone beneath skin. When had she stopped eating regular meals? August. She remembered August because that was when the foreclosure notice arrived. The small apartment with the ghost named Gerald was owned by someone in Sacramento who no longer wanted to be bothered with tenants who could not pay, and Aria had 6 weeks left before the locks changed. She had exactly $78 to her name. $78, and she could taste the math like copper on her tongue. $23 for the bus pass so she could get to work. $12 for the cheapest food she could find, white bread, peanut butter, the kind with the fake oil that settled on top like a prophecy of regret. That left $43. $43 had to last until Wednesday, which was not possible, which meant she would starve a little faster than planned, which was fine, which was fine, which was fine. Her legs hit the floor. Cold. The radiator had stopped working in November, and November had become December, and now the second week of December was folding into the third, and still the landlord had not answered the phone. She wrapped her thin white care home uniform around her body like armor that could not armor anything, and she did not look in the mirror. The bus ride took 40 minutes. She stood the entire way, never sat, because sitting was for people who believed they deserved to rest, and held the pole with fingers that had begun to show the tremors of someone not eating. An old woman across from her kept watching, which meant Aria was too visible, which was bad. Invisible was safer. Invisible was how you survived. The Lincoln Care Home rose up from the corner of 4th and Clement like a concrete monument to abandonment. 3 stories. Beige siding that had faded to the color of institutional memory. Windows with bars because the people inside sometimes forgot why they had come, and management had to protect them from their own fear of leaving. She clocked in at 7:59 a.m. Her supervisor, a woman named Carol who wore her cruelty-like expensive perfume, did not look up from her desk. Mrs. Yamamoto had a fall last night. You're on all the incontinence changes. Room 304 through 312. Breakfast comes up at 8:15. Aria nodded. She did not speak. Speaking meant Carol would remember she existed, and remembering meant Carol might decide Aria was too slow or too incompetent or needed to take a $5 an hour pay cut. The 8 hours of standing stretched ahead like a sentence. By 2 o'clock, her feet had stopped sending pain signals. This was not healing. It was something worse. It was her body deciding that continuing to hurt was a luxury, the same way starving was a luxury, the same way sleep was a luxury she could no longer afford. She changed Mrs. Yamamoto's sheets. She helped Mr. Hassan into the bathroom. She fed Mrs. Chen soup that came from a can and tasted like salt had learned to cry. At 11 p.m., she was wiping down the shower in room 309 when her phone buzzed. Douglas Hale. Her hand froze on the tile. The phone buzzed again. Again. 3 times in succession, which meant he was angry, which meant she had done something wrong without knowing what, which meant the evening was about to become a different kind of rain. She did not answer. She finished the shower. She clocked out at 5:03 p.m., 3 minutes early, because Carol had decided Aria could leave early today, which Carol never decided, which meant something had shifted in the world. She walked out of the Lincoln Care Home into the December cold, and her phone buzzed again. 3 text messages. No words. Just her name repeated like a curse. Like a name being erased and written again over and over until it meant nothing. The sky had begun to crack open. She was supposed to meet him. Tonight. At the parking lot near the marina where they used to park when he loved her, which he did not love her, which he had never loved her. She was supposed to bring money, money she did not have, money that did not exist, money that would have to come from somewhere impossible. She was supposed to apologize for sleeping with someone else, which she had not done, which he believed she had done because believing it gave him permission to hurt her. The rain began in earnest. She walked toward the marina instead of toward home, because home was a concrete studio that would be taken away in 43 days, because nothing in that room was worth protecting, because at least the rain was honest. At least the rain did not pretend to love you. At least the rain would kill you quickly. The parking lot was empty except for his truck. Black. Lifted. The kind of vehicle that suggested he had money from somewhere, which he did, which she had learned came from Diana Whitfield, which was a name she tried not to think about because thinking about it made the pain sharper. He was waiting by the driver's side door, his body leaning against the truck like a question mark. 29 years old and already carrying the weight of someone who had decided he was owed payment for simply existing. Dark hair. Dark eyes. A smile that had once made her believe in mercy and now made her believe in nothing. "You're late," Douglas Hale said. His voice carried the texture of gravel. Of things broken and never repaired. "I came straight from work," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, the sound a ghost makes when it realizes it has already died. "You came straight from your shift at that nursing home." He smiled wider. Not happy. The opposite of happy. The smile of someone watching an animal walk into a trap. "You didn't come from anywhere else." "No," Aria said. "Nowhere else." He moved toward her like water finding the lowest point. His hand caught her jaw. Not gentle. The opposite of gentle. The grip of someone who has learned that gentleness is a lie you tell weak people. "You've been talking to him again," Douglas said. "Don't lie to me." "I haven't talked to anyone," she said. The rain was cold against her skin. Her rib cage was a cage and something inside was trying to escape. "You're lying," he said, and then his other hand moved, and then there was pain, and then there was the moment her body understood that this time it might not survive, and then there was the moment she ran. She ran through the rain-soaked parking lot, and his footsteps followed like thunder, and the city lights scattered in front of her like stars falling out of the sky. She ran with her left hand clutching her ribs where his fist had gone through fabric and skin, and she ran toward the only place that might take her in, which was not a place at all but a restaurant, which was Bella Not, which was 6 blocks away and might as well have been the moon. The rain fell harder. By the time she reached the service entrance, she was no longer running. She was dissolving. She was becoming a thing made of water and pain, and her white uniform was a map of blood, and her hand against the cold metal door was the last prayer she would ever pray. And 12 hours later, she still did not know that the man watching her through the frosted glass would change everything. The alarm on Aria Reynolds' phone screamed at 5:48 in the morning, 3 minutes before her body had permission to wake. She lay in the dark of her studio apartment, a room so small that if she stretched both arms, she could touch 2 walls at once, and did not move. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like a continent she did not recognize. She stared at it while her heart finished breaking from a dream she could not remember. The shower ran cold. It had run cold for 6 weeks, ever since the hot water heater in the building gave up, and the landlord, a man named Victor who wore cologne that smelled like gasoline and regret, told all the tenants that repairs would cost money, and money was a thing that no longer existed in this building. Aria stood under the cold spray and counted her ribs with her fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Still there. Still hers. She dressed in the white uniform of Sunset Gardens elderly care home, the fabric thin from 1,000 washings, the collar yellowed despite bleach, the hem coming loose at the left seam. She had safety-pinned it twice. The pins held. Her wallet sat on the nightstand next to a photograph of her mother taken 15 years ago, before the stroke, before the medical debt, before everything. Aria opened the wallet with the reverence of someone handling a prayer card. $83. No. She looked again. $78. The 3 bills and coins she had found last night in the break room couch, she had already calculated into her mental ledger. $78 to last until Friday. It was Tuesday. She transferred $50 from her checking account to her mother's account in Columbus, Ohio. The transfer processed instantly. The screen now read, available balance, $28. Below that, in red text like a warning, another number glowed, total debt, $22,847. The foreclosure notice was in her locker at work. She knew every word by heart. 14 days remained. The house where she had learned to walk, where her mother had taught her to pray, where her younger brother had died in the bathtub when he was 4 and she was 6 and she had not been able to save him. That house belonged to the bank now. In 14 days, the locks would change, and her mother would have nowhere to go except to Aria, and Aria lived in a room smaller than the closet of that house. She took the bus to Sunset Gardens. The number 9 line, for stops, no transfers. The bus smelled like wet vinyl and the particular despair of people traveling to jobs they hated. Aria sat by the window and watched the city transform. The wealthy neighborhoods of Pacific Heights gave way to the Mission, which gave way to the industrial edge where Sunset Gardens waited like a tired old woman in a white dress. The building was 114 years old. It had been a mansion once, built by a railroad baron who died in 1952, murdered by his own son over an inheritance dispute. The building remembered this. It remembered being beautiful. Now it housed 42 elderly residents and 12 staff members, and the walls were painted a shade of beige that looked like surrender. Aria clocked in at 6:14 a.m. Her supervisor, a woman named Patricia with a face like a filing cabinet and the compassion of one, handed her an assignment sheet. Mrs. Chen in room 112, breakfast and medications. Mr. Rossi in room 204, bath and toileting. Mrs. Kowalski in room 301, breakfast and vital signs. 3 rooms. 3 people. 8 hours until the evening shift began. The morning stretched ahead like a sentence with no ending punctuation. Mrs. Chen was awake when Aria entered, sitting by the window watching the fog roll in off the bay. She was 91 years old and had shrunk so much that she looked like something made of paper and memory. Her daughter visited once a month. She had not come last month. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen. How did you sleep?" "I didn't," Mrs. Chen said. "But I dreamed anyway." "That's something, isn't it? My late husband and I, we were young, and the garden was full of peonies. Pink ones. Do you like peonies, dear?" "They're beautiful," Aria said. She set the breakfast tray on the bedside table, oatmeal, toast with margarine, a cup of tea growing cold. She helped Mrs. Chen into the chair by the window. The old woman's wrists were like bird bones wrapped in paper. Her nightgown smelled like detergent and the specific smell of bodies that no longer belonged to themselves. Mrs. Chen could not finish the oatmeal. She took 3 spoonfuls and said she was full. Aria cleaned the bowl and took it back to the break room, where she stood at the sink and, after checking that no one was watching, lifted the bowl and scraped the remaining oatmeal into her mouth. The texture was like paste. The taste was like survival. Her coworker Maria found her there. Maria had been at Sunset Gardens for 4 years and had learned to move through the building like a ghost, present and absent at the same time. "Girl, you look exhausted," Maria said. She was holding a container of leftovers from her own lunch, something that smelled like chicken and hope. "I'm fine," Aria said. "Just need to make it through the double." "You're working a double again?" "Yeah. I need the overtime." Maria studied her for a moment, the way people look at things they recognize as broken. "You need to eat something real." "When's the last time you had real food?" "Sunday," Aria said. It was Wednesday. The lie came out smooth, practiced. She had learned to lie about hunger the way other people learn to lie about happiness. At 2:02 in the afternoon, during her lunch break, she sat in the break room with the door closed. She scrolled through her phone, no messages from anyone who mattered, only notifications from apps telling her she owed money to people she had never met and would never know. She checked her bank account again. The number had not changed. It never changed. It only went down. The knock on the door was sharp. Authoritative. The kind of knock that belonged to someone who did not expect to be refused. Douglas Hale stood in the parking lot wearing a shirt 2 sizes too small, the buttons straining against his chest, the fabric damp with sweat. He was 32 years old but looked younger, the way men who had never suffered anything looked young forever. His neck was thick, a football player's neck, inherited from a father who had played college ball before blowing out both knees and teaching his son that the world owed you something and that anger was the appropriate response to that debt. "Aria, baby, we need to talk," he said. "Douglas, I told you we're done. You need to leave. Just 5 minutes. Please." She said no, but he moved closer anyway, and his hand came up and wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet made of bone and intention. His skin was warm. His grip was not. She felt the blood pulse against his fingers. "You're hurting me," she said. "I'm barely touching you," he said. "You're so delicate now. Are you eating enough?" She wrenched her wrist away. The impression of his fingers remained, for small red marks like a brand. She walked back toward the building, and he did not follow, but he stood there in the parking lot and watched her go, and his smile was the smile of someone who had all the time in the world. Patricia was at the front desk. She saw something on Aria's face, but she did not ask. She never asked. In this building, everyone was drowning, and they had all learned not to throw life preservers to each other. The afternoon shift was longer than the morning. Mr. Rossi had dementia, and he woke from a nap asking for his daughter, a woman who had died in 1997. Aria held his hand. His skin felt like thin leather, translucent, ready to tear if she squeezed too hard. "Daddy," he said, looking at her with eyes that had traveled back 60 years to a place she could not follow. "When did you get home?" "It's me," she said. "It's Margaret. Everything's okay. I'm here." He seemed to relax, and they sat together in the silence of the room while the fog outside thickened and the afternoon became grey and then greyer. She thought about her own father, who had left when she was 3 and sent a birthday card when she turned 4, and never sent anything again. She thought about the fact that Mr. Ross's daughter had died thinking about him, that the last thing she probably said was his name. At 3:33 in the afternoon, she found $3 in coins in the couch cushion of the break room. Someone had left it there months ago, probably Patricia, who often left small change in obvious places, a secret kindness for the people who would need it. Aria pocketed the coins. Now she had $81. The evening shift began at 4:22 p.m. Her phone buzzed at 4:13. A text from Douglas, "This isn't over." She read it once, then deleted it, then deleted the entire conversation, erasing the history of his messages like she could erase the history of his hands. But the threat remained, alive in the space where the words had been. The thunder started at 9:08 in the evening, a sound like the sky breaking. Aria was helping Mrs. Kowalski prepare for bed, the room dim except for the small lamp in the corner that cast everything in sepia tones. The old woman's hand shook as she buttoned her nightgown. "There's a storm coming," Mrs. Kowalski said. "I can always tell. The air tastes like it." When Aria's shift ended at 11:48 p.m., the parking lot had become a different world. The summer storm had arrived with the fury of something that had been waiting a long time to be angry. The sky was black. The rain fell in sheets so thick you could not see the cars parked 10 feet away. The wind moved through the trees like a blade wrapped in ice, and somewhere in that darkness was the number 9 bus, waiting to carry her home, or to carry her nowhere, or to carry her into whatever came next. She stood in the doorway and gathered herself. Only 30 blocks between here and her apartment. Only that. The rain was cold against her skin, and she had already begun walking. The summer rain came like a punishment, arriving at 11:22 p.m. with the fury of something that had been waiting a long time to be angry. The sky split open above the parking lot of Sunset Gardens, and Aria Reynolds stood in the doorway with her thin cardigan pulled tight, watching the world dissolve into water and darkness. $78 in her pocket. That was all she had. $78 to last until Thursday, and Thursday was 5 days away. She stepped into the downpour. The rain was cold against her skin, immediate and relentless, soaking through the fabric of her care facility uniform within seconds. Her shift had ended at 11:41 p.m., but Mrs. Kowalski had needed help with her nightgown, and old people's needs do not respect the clock. The bus stop was 6 blocks away. 6 blocks through a storm that turned the sidewalk into a river and made the streetlights blur like dying stars. Aria kept her head down and walked. The alley came without warning. She had taken a shortcut behind Bella Not restaurant to save 2 blocks, to save 5 minutes, to save the energy she did not have left. The brick walls rose on either side, narrow and close, and the rain echoed between them in a way that made the world feel smaller. That was when she heard the footsteps. They came from behind, measured and unhurried, and she knew before she turned that it was Douglas. She knew the weight of his footsteps the way a mouse knows the shadow of a hawk. She had been waiting for this since the text arrived at 4:13 p.m. "This isn't over. We need to talk," he said. His voice was the same voice that had whispered promises in the dark, and then later, threats in the dark, and she had learned that his voice was not a voice at all but a weapon shaped like words. She did not stop walking. "Get away from me, Douglas. You think you can just ignore me?" He was moving faster now, and the rain made his footsteps sound like they were coming from everywhere at once. "Diana's been very patient with you, Aria. Very patient. But patience wears thin. I don't know what you're talking about." He grabbed her arm, and his hand was like ice wrapped around bone. He shoved her backward against the brick wall of the alley, and her head struck the wet stone. Stars exploded in her vision. "You're going to listen to me," he said. His face was close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath, could see the violence in his eyes like a candle burning behind glass. "Diana needs her $125,000. 2 weeks, Aria. 2 weeks, or you're going to wish you had never been born." She fought. She clawed at his face, and her nails found skin and left marks, and he cursed and pulled back, and in that moment of space between them she saw the knife. It caught the streetlight at the end of the alley, just for a second, and then it was moving toward her. The blade caught the side of her ribs. Not deep enough to kill. Deep enough to hurt. Deep enough to leave a message written in blood. She screamed. "That's a warning," he said. His voice was calm now, almost gentle, which was worse than the violence. "Diana wants to know that you understand the situation. That you're taking her seriously. 2 weeks, and the debt gets paid, or we have to have another conversation like this one." He released her. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her ribs, feeling the warmth beneath her fingers, feeling the fabric of her uniform growing heavy with blood. He walked away down the alley, his footsteps echoing off the brick until they disappeared into the sound of the rain. She stood there for a moment, breathing. Just breathing. Then she heard the crying. It was small and thin, almost lost beneath the thunder, but she heard it. Coming from near the dumpster at the far end of the alley. A child's voice. Aria moved toward it despite the pain in her ribs, despite the blood, despite everything screaming at her to run. There was a little girl huddled beside the dumpster in a yellow raincoat, her small face streaked with tears and rain. She could not have been more than 7 years old. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, and she was shaking. "Sweetie," Aria said, kneeling down though the movement sent fire through her side. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The child pointed toward the back entrance of Bella Not restaurant, which was illuminated by a single lamp above the service door. The girl's lip trembled as she spoke. "I ran away. Papa was talking about business, and Enzo was standing by the door, and nobody was looking, and I just ran." Aria did not think. She simply removed her cardigan, the one thin layer of warmth she possessed, and wrapped it around the child's shoulders. The bleeding in her ribs could wait. The deck could wait. Everything could wait. "Come on," she whispered. "Let's get you back inside." She took the child's hand, and they walked toward the restaurant service entrance, the girl's small fingers gripping Aria's as if she were the only solid thing in a world made of water and chaos. At 11:43 p.m., the kitchen door opened. The heat hit first, the warmth of ovens and stoves, the smell of garlic and tomato sauce and expensive olive oil. The kitchen staff froze when they saw her. Saw the blood. Saw the child in the yellow raincoat gripping a stranger's hand. The head chef, Marco, took one step forward, his mouth opening, but the child pulled away from Aria and ran deeper into the restaurant, toward the candlelit back room where the real business was happening. Aria tried to follow, tried to apologize, tried to explain, but her legs were moving on will alone now, and the cardigan was soaked through, and somewhere behind her someone was shouting orders, and somewhere ahead she could hear men's voices stopping mid-sentence. The private dining room fell silent when Emma Castellano walked in holding the hand of a bleeding stranger. Aleandro Castellano sat at the head of a mahogany table that cost more than a small house. The candlelight caught the angles of his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the scar that ran from his left eye to his cheekbone like a map of old violence. He was tall even sitting down, with shoulders that seemed to hold the weight of entire city blocks. His suit was charcoal, perfectly tailored, worth more than everything Aria had ever owned combined. But it was his eyes that stopped you, dark and penetrating, the color of a storm before it breaks. "Papa," Emma said, her small voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "She helped me. She was hurt, but she helped me." Enzo and Sal stood immediately. Their hands moved toward the inside of their jackets in perfect synchronization, a choreography perfected over years of violence. Then they saw her face, and they saw the blood, and they saw their boss's expression shift like a tectonic plate moving beneath the ocean. "Sit her down," Aleandro said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "Now. Marco, get the first aid kit." Aria tried to speak. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude, I just wanted to make sure she got back safely." "You're bleeding," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of a man accustomed to having reality conform itself to his will. "Sit." She sat. Enzo and Sal exchanged a look that lasted exactly 2 seconds but contained a conversation years in the making. In 15 years of working for Aleandro Castellano, they had never heard this tone in his voice. Not to them. Not to anyone. He knelt in front of her chair, actually knelt, bringing his face level with hers, and gently lifted her blood-soaked uniform to examine the wound. His jaw tightened as he studied the slash marks, the pattern of them, what they meant. "Who did this?" His voice was very quiet now. "Nobody," she said. "It's nothing. This is not nothing." He spoke like a man delivering a verdict from which there was no appeal. Marco returned with a first aid kit, and Aleandro opened it himself. He cleaned the wound with methodical precision, his hands steady despite everything they had done in his 34 years of life. Emma sat beside Aria and took her hand, and the child's small fingers held on like she had found something precious and was afraid it would float away. "What's your name?" Emma asked. "Aria," she said. "My name is Aria." "Aria," the child repeated, testing the word. "That's a pretty name. Like music." Aleandro worked in silence, applying antiseptic, preparing the wound for stitches. His movements were practiced, automatic. This was a man who knew injury the way other men knew their telephone numbers. "Why would you help me?" Aria asked. Her voice was trembling like a candle in the wind. "I'm nobody. You don't know me. I'm nobody." Aleandro looked at her, and for a moment the hardness in his expression shifted into something she could not name. "You protected my daughter when you could barely stand. That makes you somebody." He called his personal physician at 11:27 p.m. Dr. Santos arrived at 12:20 a.m., and while the doctor worked, Aria told them fragments of her story in the spaces between needle and thread. Double shifts at Sunset Gardens. A mother in Ohio facing foreclosure and cancer treatment. Surgery bills totaling $47,000. Her mother's mortgage payment of $22,000 due in 45 days. And the debt. The debt of $125,000 that she had never borrowed, never signed for, never even heard of until Diana Whitfield's collection notices began arriving at an address Aria did not recognize. 14 sutures. The doctor tied off the final knot at 12:40 a.m., and the bleeding stopped. Meanwhile, at 1:15 a.m., Enzo returned to the private dining room carrying a folder. His footsteps were heavy with what he was about to say. He laid the folder on the table without speaking. Inside was a photograph of Douglas Hale. And beside it, documents detailing his employment history as muscle for Diana Whitfield, a socialite who ran a loan sharking operation disguised as a charity foundation that helped vulnerable women. Diana had been targeting women like Aria for 3 years, forging documents, destroying credit, freezing access to shelters and aid programs, pushing them toward desperation and recruitment. Aleandro looked at Aria. She was looking at the photograph, and her face had gone the color of something no longer living. "Where does she live?" Aleandro asked Enzo. Enzo provided an address. A mansion in Pacific Heights worth $8 million. A woman who had never worked a day in her life but somehow controlled the financial futures of dozens of desperate people. But Aleandro said nothing of this to Aria. Instead, he said only, "You'll stay here tonight. Emma's room has a second bed. You'll stay where it's safe." Aria tried to protest, but Emma was tugging at her hand, and the child's hope was brighter than all the reasons to say no, and so Aria said yes. Emma led her upstairs to the apartment above the restaurant, chattering about her favorite stuffed animals and the color of the sky before storms, and Aria followed like someone moving through water, trying not to cry from relief and confusion and the knowledge that her life had just changed in a way she could not yet measure. From the doorway, Aleandro watched them disappear down the hallway. "Boss," Enzo said. His voice carried a question. "Find everything," Aleandro said quietly. "Every transaction, every threat, every lie. I want Diana Whitfield's empire mapped by dawn. And Douglas Hale." He paused. "Find him first." What Aria did not know was that Aleandro Castellano had learned a terrible lesson 5 years ago. His own brother, Marco, had betrayed him to the Volkov syndicate, had sold the family's operations, had chosen money over blood. Aleandro had let mercy slip from his hands that day, and in its place he had found only survival. Since then, he trusted no one. The world had taught him that loyalty was a luxury the ruthless could not afford. Until tonight, when a bleeding stranger had protected his daughter without asking for anything in return. Aria wakes at 6:48 in the morning in a bed that is not hers, in a room painted soft yellow with stuffed animals arranged on shelves like silent sentries. The bandages on her ribs are white and clean. Her old clothes, soaked and bloodied, are gone. Someone washed her. Someone stitched her. Someone chose to save her instead of turning away. Emma's bed is already empty. A note sits on the nightstand in careful handwriting, "Rest. Breakfast downstairs." The apartment above the restaurant is quiet in a way Aria has never known quiet. Not the silence of holding her breath. Not the silence of waiting for Douglas's fist. This is the silence of safety, and it terrifies her more than screaming ever could. Downstairs, the restaurant gleams under morning light. The black and white checkered floor stretches toward the kitchen where nothing burns or breaks or hurts. And there, at the bar, sits Aleandro Castellano surrounded by files and photographs, his dark eye scanning papers with the intensity of a man reading a death sentence. He hasn't slept. The suit he wore last night has been replaced with another, identical, the kind that costs more than 3 months of her wages. His hair is still damp. His knuckles are white where they grip the edge of the bar. When he sees her descend the stairs, something shifts in his expression, not softness, but a slight loosening, like a fist unclenching by millimeters. "You didn't sleep," Aria says. Her voice is barely there, like a whisper through broken glass. "Neither did you." He gestures to the chair beside him. "Eat. There is fresh fruit. Warm bread. Espresso in a cup that probably costs more than her entire breakfast budget for a month." She sits down slowly, afraid that moving too quickly will shatter whatever spell is keeping her alive. "I need to go," she says. "My shift starts at 7. At the care home. If I don't show up, they'll fire me, and I can't." "You're not working today." "I can't afford to miss." "You have 14 stitches." His voice is flat, final, like a blade. "You're not working." She opens her mouth to argue. Then her phone vibrates on the table. Douglas's name flashes on the screen. She doesn't answer. It rings again. And again. Her hand shakes so badly that she nearly drops the phone. "Answer it," Aleandro says quietly. "Put it on speaker." She does. Her thumb moves like it belongs to someone else. "Aria, baby, I'm sorry about last night." Douglas's voice comes through like an oil spill, thick, suffocating, poisonous. "Got a little heated. You know how it is. But Diana's serious. Very serious. 13 days. $125,000. Or she's going to make sure your mother loses that house. And a lot more." Aria's breath catches. Her mother's house. The only thing her mother has left in the world. The only place that feels like home to anyone in her family. "I never borrowed that money, Douglas." Her voice cracks. "You know I didn't. Doesn't matter what you think you did, sweetheart. The paperwork says otherwise. See you soon." He hangs up. Aria sits motionless, her hands folded on the table like she's praying. Aleandro's expression doesn't change, but his knuckles go white where they grip the bar. His jaw tightens so hard that a muscle jumps beneath his skin. When he breathes, it's deliberate, controlled, like a man holding back something that wants to explode. "Who is Diana Whitfield?" he asks. Aria laughs, but it breaks in the middle. The laugh becomes a sob, and the sob becomes something worse, a collapse, like a building whose foundation has finally crumbled. She puts her head down on the table, and her shoulders shake with an exhaustion that runs deeper than sleep. She sits at the empty restaurant table at 7:23 in the morning, rain still drumming against the windows, cold grey light filtering through like dirty water. Her hands shake as she pulls out her phone and stares at her bank account screen, $28. The foreclosure notice, $22,000. Her mother's medical bills from last year, $47,000. The impossible debt Diana created, $125,000. Total, $194,028. She has $28. Aria starts laughing, and the sound bounces off the empty walls like it belongs to someone else. It turns into sobbing. Her shoulders shake so hard the stitches pull at her ribs, and fresh pain blooms like poison flowers along her torso. She's so tired. 2 jobs. No sleep. Every dollar she earns gets sent away before she even touches it. And now this, a debt she never created, a man who won't stop hunting her, a child's kindness that she doesn't deserve because kindness is a luxury for people who have a future. She reaches for her jacket. She thinks about walking. Just walking until her legs give out. The Golden Gate Bridge is beautiful in the morning, she's heard. Cold water. Dark. Easy. But then she sees it on the table, the worn prayer card. St. Jude, patron saint of lost causes. Her grandmother gave it to her years ago, before the cancer took her voice, then her body, then everything. The edges are soft from years of handling. The laminate is peeling at one corner. She picks it up. Something stops. One tiny thing. A dead woman's gift. A prayer from someone who believed in miracles even when miracles stopped believing in her. Aria sits back down. That's when Aleandro speaks from the doorway. "I know what you were thinking." "Don't." She looks up, tears streaming, her face destroyed. "You don't understand." Her voice is barely audible. "I can't fix this. There's no way out. The debt, the threats, all of it, there's no way out. There's always a way out." He moves into the restaurant, his footsteps measured and unhurried. "Trust me." He pulls out his phone. At 8:15 in the morning, 12 men in black tactical gear move like ghosts through San Francisco. Enzo leads one team to Douglas Hale's apartment in Daly City. Sal leads another toward Pacific Heights. Simultaneously, federal agents receive anonymous packages containing complete documentation, Diana Whitfield's loan sharking operation, Douglas's assault record, connections to 3 unsolved attacks on women, forged documents, wire fraud, extortion accounts numbering in the millions. At 8:22 in the morning, Douglas Hale wakes to boots kicking in his door. FBI SWAT floods his apartment in tactical vests and weapons drawn. He scrambles backward, trips over his own feet, collapses like a wounded animal on the kitchen floor. Wait, I can explain. I was just following orders. Douglas Hale, Agent Reeves says, reading from the warrant, you're under arrest for aggravated assault, extortion, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Handcuffs snap shut with a sound like a cage door closing. Cameras flash outside. News crews, tipped off anonymously, capture every second. The perp walk happens at 9:15 in the morning. Every channel. Every station. Meanwhile, Diana Whitfield's mansion in Pacific Heights. She's in her silk robe drinking coffee when federal agents breach the gate. She tries to run. Tries to call her lawyers. Agent Morrison reads the charges. Diana Whitfield, you're under arrest for racketeering, loan sharking, wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Diana's face crumbles like wet paper. Do you know who I am? My family has connections, they'll. Your family can't help you now. The evidence is overwhelming. 47 women trapped in manufactured debt. 17 forged loan documents. $4.2 million in illegal proceeds. Cameras capture her being led out in handcuffs, mascara running, her voice breaking as she screams about lawyers and judges and people who owe her favors. Not death. Too quick. Too easy. Too merciful. Systematic destruction. Federal charges carry mandatory minimums. Douglas Hale, 40 years in federal prison, no parole, no good time credits. Diana Whitfield, 45 years, all assets seized, her foundation dissolved, her name erased from every board and charity and place of power she ever touched. Both trials fast-tracked with evidence so overwhelming that even their lawyers don't bother to fight. Aria watches the news at 10:33 in the morning, her mouth open, her hands covering her face. How did this happen? She whispers. Aleandro stands beside her, his expression unchanged. Justice happened, he says quietly. Sometimes it just needs the right push. But she's not stupid. She looks at him, and in her eyes there's a terrible understanding. You did this. I made some calls. The evidence did the rest. Why? He meets her eyes. In them is something that has never been reflected back to her before, someone choosing her. Someone wielding their power not to destroy her, but to protect her. Because you protected my daughter, he says. And because no one should be hunted for existing. The fraudulent debt paperwork is revealed for what it is, lies on government forms, signatures forged, numbers invented by a woman who played games with human lives. Aria owes nothing. Her credit will be restored. Diana's seized assets will compensate all 47 victims. The rain outside finally stops. Just stops. Like the sky itself has decided to be merciful. The train platform was almost empty at 2:09 in the morning. Aria sat alone on a bench made of cold metal, her small backpack resting against her leg, the prayer card tucked safely inside. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her breath coming in small, shaky waves. The ticket in her hand cost $73, nearly all she had left in the world. The 2:15 train to Los Angeles would arrive in 6 minutes. 6 minutes between the life she was running from and the emptiness waiting for her. She had written the letter by lamplight at Emma's small desk, her hands trembling so badly she could barely hold the pen. Every word had felt like a knife cutting through her own heart. She knew what she had to do. Aleandro Castellano commanded an empire built on fear and secrets. She was a maid who ate leftovers, a woman with nothing, a liability in a world where enemies hunted for weaknesses. Emma was asleep in the next room. That beautiful 7-year-old child who had started calling her Mama Aria 3 weeks ago. The letter sat on his desk downstairs. He would find it when he came home. Aria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked at the tracks stretching out into darkness. The wind moved across the platform like a blade wrapped in ice, cutting through her thin jacket. She had no coat. She never could afford one. The digital clock above the platform read 2:14. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot with a sound like distant thunder. Aria's head snapped up. Her body recognized that engine before her mind could understand what was happening. Doors opened, 2, 3, 4. Footsteps on pavement, fast and purposeful. She stood up, her backpack falling to the ground. Aleandro appeared at the edge of the platform. He moved toward her with the kind of speed that made the air around him seem smaller, tighter. Behind him came Enzo and Sal, their dark suits moving like shadows. The train was pulling into the station. The doors were opening. "Aria," he called. His voice carried across the emptiness like a command. She turned toward him, tears streaming down her face. He was holding something small in his hand. As he grew closer, she saw what it was, the worn prayer card. The one her grandmother had given her, the one she thought she had lost weeks ago when she was bleeding in the alley outside that restaurant. He stopped directly in front of her. This man who commanded billions. This man whose name made federal agents nervous. He was breathing hard, and in his dark eyes was something she had never seen before, something that looked almost like panic. "You dropped this," he said, his voice like thunder wrapped in velvet. "Again." She reached for the card with shaking hands. "How did you?" "I read your letter." The way he said it made it sound like a confession of his own. Like reading her words had cost him something. "Then you know why I have to go." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Aleandro, I'm nobody. I'm a maid. I eat leftover oatmeal from the restaurant garbage. I'm not." "You're the woman who protected my daughter while bleeding in an alley," he interrupted, stepping closer. "You're the woman who kept fighting when the world tried to bury you. You're the woman Emma asks for every morning when she wakes up. She asks for you before she asks for food or water. She asks for you." His jaw tightened. "You're not nobody, Aria Reynolds. You never were." Tears streamed harder down her face. "Your enemies will use me. They'll use me to hurt Emma, to hurt you. I won't be another weakness for them to exploit. You've lost enough." He stepped so close she could feel the warmth of him in the frozen air. "So am I scared," he said quietly. "I haven't let anyone close enough to matter since my brother sold me to my enemies 5 years ago. Not until you collapsed in the rain outside my restaurant, and my daughter took your hand like you were the answer to a prayer she didn't know how to ask." The train doors were open behind her. The platform was silent except for the hum of electricity and the sound of their breathing. "I'm frightened," Aria whispered. "I know." His hand reached up and touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. This man made of ice and power, and he was trembling. "But the storm will pass. And you are far stronger than you think." She dropped her backpack. It fell to the concrete with a soft thud. She collapsed into him, her body folding into his chest, her sobs breaking open like the sky finally releasing all its rain. His arms came around her, solid and absolute, holding her like he would hold his own heartbeat if it tried to leave. Behind them, the train waited. Then it began to move, sliding away down the tracks without her, disappearing into the darkness, taking the only escape route she had planned for herself. Enzo and Sal exchanged a look neither had seen in the 15 years they had worked for Aleandro Castellano. This was not the man they knew. This was someone different. This was someone who had been healed by the simple act of someone choosing to stay. 6 months passed like water through open hands. Aria stood in the bright afternoon light of the restaurant's main dining room, her hands moving through files and paperwork with the kind of purpose that had been missing from her life for so long she had almost forgotten what it felt like. She was no longer a maid. She was the director of the Castellano Foundation's community outreach program, helping vulnerable women find resources, safety, and jobs. 47 women. That was the number Diana Whitfield had trapped in her manufactured debt scheme. 47 women, and now all of them had a second chance. Aria had made sure of it. In the back office, her mother was wrapped in a cardigan that her daughter had bought her, sitting at a desk, her hair beginning to grow back dark and thick. The cancer was in remission. The house was saved. For the first time in a decade, her mother was not afraid of what would happen next month. Mama Aria, look what I drew. Emma burst through the kitchen door with a picture held high above her head. She was 7 now, with dark eyes like her father's and a smile that could make the sun jealous. She had called Aria Mama for the first time on a Tuesday morning in February, and Aria had wept so hard that Aleandro had thought something was broken. She had explained, laughing and crying, that something that had been shattered for years was finally becoming whole again. Aria scooped Emma into her arms and examined the drawing, bright colors, 3 figures holding hands, a sun in the corner that took up half the sky. It's beautiful, baby. Tell me about it. That's you, and that's Daddy, and that's Grandma. And that's the sun making everything happy again. Emma pointed to each figure with the certainty of a child who had never been taught to doubt her own joy. Aleandro watched from the doorway of his office upstairs. He leaned against the frame, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were burning with something that 5 years ago he would have called weakness. He had buried his capacity for softness the night his brother sold him to his enemies in exchange for money he couldn't even spend. He had learned to build walls so high that nothing could penetrate them. Aria Reynolds had walked through those walls like they were smoke. That night, on the restaurant's balcony overlooking San Francisco, with the city lights spreading out like a universe of small stars, Aleandro stood with his arm around her shoulders. Aria's head rested on his chest, and she could feel his heartbeat steady and certain beneath her ear. The prayer card was in her pocket, the one she had dropped twice, and twice he had found it and returned it to her. "I've been thinking about something," he said quietly. His voice was different now when he spoke to her, less like a command and more like a conversation between 2 people who had decided to trust each other with their fragile, broken, precious pieces. "What's that?" She tilted her head up to look at him. He pulled a small box from his coat pocket. It was made of dark leather, and when he opened it, the diamond inside caught the light and threw it back at her in 1,000 directions. "I want you to stop wondering if you belong here. I want you to stop being afraid that you're not enough. Because you are everything, Aria. You always were. The world just took too long to catch up." She looked at the ring, then at him, then at the city below them where she used to walk the streets invisible and afraid. The woman who had carried all of $78 and a prayer card in her pocket. The woman who had offered her umbrella to a stranger in the rain. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." The storm had passed. The sky had cleared. And in the clearing, there was light and warmth, and the kind of love that only arrives when 2 broken people decide they are strong enough to heal together. Kindness is never wasted, even when offered by those who believe they have nothing left to give. A single act of compassion can save 2 lives, the one who receives it and the one who gives it. And strength is not measured by never falling. It is measured by who catches you when you do, and whether you are brave enough to let them. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with someone who needs to hear that they matter. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the stories coming tomorrow. Leave a comment below. Have you ever helped a stranger without knowing how much it would change your life? We read every single comment. Thank you for staying with us. After the rain, the sky clears. We will see you again very soon.